Hello there and welcome into the Career Competitor Podcast with me, Steve Mellor. And as always, we are the show that seeks to light that competitive fire within you in order to jumpstart or optimize your career. I'm very excited to be welcoming in Maritza McClendon to the Career Competitor Podcast today. Believe it or not, Maritza and I first met back in, I believe, 2006. So a long time ago. We've known each other for a while. Far too much time goes by between each time we see and talk, but I'm just glad to be bringing her on for so much fantastic insight coming your way. But before I give Maritza the introduction that she certainly deserves, let me tell you all about my service, Career Competitor. So Career Competitor is a coaching and consulting service for those of you that want to really narrow that gap between where your expectations currently are and where your optimal self actually is. I believe that we are capable and curious to discover what it is we can be doing, what it is we are capable of. So with that being said, why don't you take the time to reach out to me, steve@careercompetitor.com. That's steve@careercompetitor.com, where you can set up a 30-minute free consultation so that I can get a better understanding of where you currently are in your career, in your life, and where you feel as though some performance coaching can make an impact to you. I don't just work with individuals, I work with teams as well. But the fact of the matter is, there is an opportunity here for you to reach your optimal self, and I'm here to facilitate that process. So again, steve@careercompetitor.com. Feel free to reach out to me there. And of course, with you listening to the show right now, click that 5th star, especially if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts. Go nowhere without clicking that 5th star, please. Leave us a review, give us a follow, subscribe to the show, etc., etc. But for now, I'll leave it right there so we can get on to introducing my guest, Maritza McClendon. Now, Maritza is the Director of Talent and Development and Corporate Communications within Human Resources at Carter's, Inc. Maritza happens to be the first African-American woman in 2004 at the Athens Games to represent the United States in swimming and medal at the same time. As you're going to find out here, there's so much about Maritza's story that we can relate to. If you're a former athlete, this is 100% an episode for you. Very much where this show was born in relation to taking those great characteristics, those principles that make you an athlete, a successful athlete, make you a competitor, and taking those into the corporate world, into whatever space it is that you're doing after your life as an athlete. So I'm excited for Maritza to shed some light on that part of her life, but also for anyone who's looking to separate themselves simply in their careers and perform at higher levels. There's so much in here for you too. There is nothing that we are missing here on this particular episode of Career Competitor. So I won't delay it any longer, and I'll welcome in Maritza McClendon to the Career Competitor Podcast, and I hope you all enjoy. Okay, well, it gives me great pleasure to welcome on someone I've known for a long time, and we're just catching up for the first time in a while here today. Maritza McClendon is joining us on the Career Competitor Podcast. Maritza, how are you today?
Hi, Steve. Doing great. Today's a fantastic day. It's Juneteenth, and I was just telling you a couple minutes ago that this is the first time our company is celebrating Juneteenth. So we actually have the day off, and it's pretty amazing to see where we've come. Right, a long time ago, wouldn't even have thought about having Juneteenth as a national federal holiday. So it's great to see the progress.
It is, and it's such a beautiful coincidence that we're getting to do that today, and I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to have you on the show. You're someone who I've never probably told you this to your face before, but I've been a long admirer, huge fan, just appreciate everything you've done, specifically to the sport that I certainly used to work in, and you've obviously given so much to in the sport of swimming. But there's so much more to you, Maritza, and I'm so glad to go into that today. But before we go too much into the past and bring people up to speed, why don't you tell everybody what it is you're actually doing today for your career?
Yeah, so today I am actually, let's see, I'll tell you a couple of careers. So I'm married. So I've been married for 11 years. We have two wonderful children. I have an 8 and 10-year-old who, yes, they do swim. I don't know if swimming will be their career, but hopefully it will be soon. We'll figure it out. And then I also still have, as you know, I'm a 2004 Olympic swimmer and first Black female to make a U.S. Olympic swim team. So I built a platform over the last several years around water safety, especially in the Black community. So that I call that my side hustle / my passion of just making sure that people who look like me know the importance of learning how to swim. So I've been doing that for a while. One of my biggest partnerships is Swim 1922, which is a partnership with Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated and USA Swimming, where we go into the communities and make sure that they understand the importance of water safety. And in most instances, we're getting them in the water, sometimes for the very first time. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then my official, I guess, real world / corporate job. I actually work at Carter's Inc., the baby clothing company for those of you guys who aren't parents. But I am in the HR department, where I'm head of talent development and corporate communications. Manage a lot of essentially any great news that a company is doing. I share it out to our internal population, and then that's a 20,000 plus employee population across the globe. We have offices in Asia and then North America. And then I also manage a lot of our talent development, meaning, how are we building our next generation of leaders? How are we ensuring that our employees have all the resources they need to be successful at our company?
So pretty quiet, really, then, huh? Not too much going on.
Keeps me a little bit
I
busy.
love it. It's what makes you so perfect for this show, though, Maritza. Honestly, we've had so many people come on now that have, titans of industry, champions of sport, whatever it may be. And the one thing everyone has in common is that they don't know what it means to take it easy.
Oh, agreed.
Everyone's busy. Everyone's got stuff going on. And I absolutely love it because I think it's a big part. I think it's a big part of what makes the successful people, and I know it's a word that sometimes we can be resistant to, but successful people, what it is they are, is they embrace the workload. They embrace what it means to actually have a full plate almost all the time. And then you get these moments, obviously, where you go away with family, have vacations and whatnot, and you enjoy them for what they are, but they're short and sweet. You get right back to it. And with that in mind, one thing that I have to go over with you is just your competitive nature, and you knew that coming into this recording, that we were going to talk a little bit about that, because I find that competitiveness is very much connected almost perfectly with what it means to just simply want to work hard, want to have a full plate. So talk to me a little bit about how those two, at least in your world, how those two maybe work with one another, collaborate, bounce off one another, however you want to put it.
Well, I have to say that the reason I started competitive swim is because of my competitive nature. So started at a young age when I was 7 years old, and I was just learning my basic water safety skills. I just want to get from one end of the pool to the other. My instructor actually had our group do relays. So first exposure to relays, I was like, this is so cool. Of course, we got split up into teams. And when I did my leg, of course, we were winning. So I was super excited. But of course, I look up, when you touch the wall, the next person's supposed to go. I'm 7. The girl who's supposed to go after me was 6. She did not go.
Yeah.
Me, my competitive self was like, why aren't you going? We're winning. You're about to let everybody pass us. So I hopped out the pool and pushed her in.
Oh, no.
That's when my mom was like, oh my gosh, we got to get her doing something. So that's when she did a little bit more research and got me into competitive swim, and I never looked back. And I will say one of the hardest things for me throughout my career was that competitive edge. Like I had that competitive edge, but I also had the self-doubt and the lack of confidence. A lot of people are like, but you were an Olympian. Yeah, it's still challenging for us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still real people, and it's something that we don't just perfect, right from the jump. So it's things that I had to work on. And then transitioning into the real world, scariest moment of my life. Had no idea what to really expect or how even my swimming skills translated into the real world. And just like you said, that competitive nature and that desire and that drive to be successful carried over into my corporate world. So any position that I was given, any interview that I did, I was competitive in the sense of I wanted to get that job. Like I wanted to nail it. I wanted to be the best that there could be. I didn't want to just do what was expected of me for that job. I wanted to exceed expectations. And that's where that additional, drive and competition and competitive nature comes in. And it's carried throughout my entire corporate career. And also just things that I talk about, whenever I do speaking engagements, I always encourage people, get that competitive nature out of you, because you'll be surprised as to the stars that you touch because you're so competitive. And I'll even say, within my family, we're also competitive. So that competitive nature is like literally in my blood. And it's also seeping into my kids' blood. So, we're busy playing, we're outdoor family, we're playing activities, we're in the water, doing water sports. And we're always like, okay, I'm going to throw that ball. Let's see who can get there faster. Or like, it could be the simplest of things. Like, I remember one time, I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll stop talking. But I remember one time, me and my husband, we had our cars and we had 2 kids. So I had my daughter and then my husband had my son, and we were coming from the same place, and we literally raced home, and we safely. We were in the car.
I was wondering where this story was going for a second.
But then we like pull up to the driveway, and I get there first, and of course I back my car in. You guys ever see me driving, you'll see me back into any parking spot. So of course I'm like starting to back in, and my husband comes like roaring down the street, and he's like, no, I'm gonna come beat you. And he like tries to sneak in. I like gunned it, and like, I mean, it's just in our nature. I think that for us, like we as athletes, like that's what drives a lot of our go-to, like it drives like who we are, what we do, how we accomplish things. I could even be competitive getting up early in the morning, and I could be competitive staying up late at night, and I could be competitive in how many things can I get done today. Like it's just something that is, like I said, it's in my blood, and it's been useful for me.
I was going to say, well, you've made it work to your best. There's no doubt about it. And it's certainly an identity. It's an identity, and there's no getting away from it. And I think what you're saying here is embracing it first and foremost, and secondly, letting it out. And I think that's a great way to look at it, to start. And then when you actually start to look at a couple of things that you said there, the first thing I want to hit is the competitive swimming, and how, as you were coming along through that, you noticed that the anxieties that came with it became heightened. It's almost as though the greater the stakes, the more exposed those anxieties would maybe start to come. Even if they were internal, they were still there. And I think that's important for anyone to hear, that it doesn't need to be swimming. It can be just about anything. As you go from one stage to the next, and you sense that improvement, and you sense those greater responsibilities, it's so natural to have the anxieties that come with it, wouldn't you say?
I agree. And I think, to a certain extent, those things kind of drive like how your performance will be, right? To an extent, being, if you can get it under control and use it to your advantage, it'll be that thing that'll kind of take you to that next level. I know whenever I get an opportunity to talk to, up and coming athletes, they always say, well, I get nervous. Like, how do you get over that? And I always say, I don't have one answer, but I will say you could definitely try different things. There's some people that listen to music and it calms them down. Some people that have to sit in a corner and kind of visualize their race or visualize whatever they're doing. But then it just find a way to kind of, I guess, contain it in a certain space. I don't want to say a box, but like kind of contain it where it's manageable. And then that's where you can kind of use it as like, okay, now my blood is pumping and I'm getting ready to race, or I'm getting ready to do, a test, or I'm getting ready to do a presentation at work, whatever it might be. It kind of gets your blood flowing so that you can start to focus in on the things that really are important for you to be successful.
Yeah, and this makes me want to ask a little bit more about that transition now from going from athlete, because it wasn't like you just swam in college and then we're done. Like, you went pro for quite a while. How long were you actually swimming after college?
I swam for an additional 6 years. That's
a long time. That's more than a college career in addition to a college career. So it's a lot of time having your identity really just embraced and immersed in this particular sport. And for those that are picking this show up now on episode 141, 142, whatever it may be, if you go back to the first 5, 10, 20 episodes that we did, this is what the show was born on. Just this transitional quest, if you will, of going from being that athlete to becoming whatever it is you're now becoming, and being able to pinpoint the characteristics, the ideals that made you the success as an athlete is what you're able to do with those characteristics now in your life afterwards. So we've lost that at times through the many, many episodes. And when I get someone on like you, Maritza, I'm always so glad to go back to it, because hearing you talk a little bit there about the space and being able to be aware of the space that you utilize certain characteristics. When did you first notice, maybe after you hung the goggles up and you started that transition, hey, there's so much of me from that life as an athlete that I need to be a little bit more receptive to maybe embracing in this next chapter?
It took a while. I
Yeah.
will say that because one of the things for me is I was an Olympic athlete and I was a professional swimmer for so long. I
Hmm.
didn't have your typical 9 to 5 job where I could say like, oh, I worked in HR for X number of years. Here's the experience that I had. I literally was like, hi, I'm a swimmer. Here's my resume. And it just
Right.
said Olympian. And to me, I was just like, it just said Olympian. Like that's how I thought of it.
Right.
But it took years for me to run into one of my biggest mentors, Christopher Montella. I met him at Nike Swim, and he was always like, "You should be screaming from the top of the mountain that you are an Olympian." And I'm like, no, I'm always been like very shy and timid about, saying that I'm an Olympian. But he was like, no, people realize the dedication that it takes to be an Olympian, the self-motivation that it takes to be an Olympian, how do you organize your day? How do you attack certain situations? Like that's very unique when it comes to that elite athlete. And so when he told me that, I was like, you're right. Like I started to eventually kind of like hear him, and he'd coach me and mentor me and kind of build up my confidence in that sense. And then, as I started to when I moved out of working for Nike Swim, I ended up working at Carter's, but then that was a whole different realm for me. That
Mhm.
was, I was in my sports world and I felt comfortable talking about it, but then I moved into Carter's and I was like quiet all over again. I was like, okay, I'm here. I've had this experience in marketing and this is what's on my resume. There was no sense of lead with you being an Olympian
Yeah.
ever that crossed my mind. And then again, I had a fantastic boss who pulled it out of me, Tracy Del Moral, who just said the same thing Christopher told me, that
Yeah.
these are unique characteristics to you as an elite athlete. Definitely leverage those to your to your best ability. And that's kind of where I started to, every project that I did under Tracy and everything that we accomplished together, she was just like, I am just amazed at how determined you are and how you stay laser focused, and you're not just trying to finish a project, but like I said earlier, I'm literally trying to be better than it's ever
Yeah.
been.
The best project ever. Right.
Right. Like
Right.
how do like it was done one way last year. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to see what was done last year, and then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to make it, my project, and also make it better and make it
Hmm.
the best performing project that it could be. So and I think that that's where that drive came from as an athlete that I didn't tap into before. But it's
Right.
taken people getting it out of me to really understand, where I could take it from there.
And it's all resonated with me on so many levels. And the fact of the matter is, it goes against the human experience of like, we're not supposed to brag, right? We're not supposed to
Right.
shout. We're not supposed to just say, hey, I'm great at this, or hey, I've achieved this. You need to give me attention because I've achieved this.
Hmm.
But it's one of the easiest pieces of advice to give to someone else. But when it's actually you, like, oh no, you don't need to hear that about me.
So
So
true.
it's fascinating to hear you starting that story with this just an Olympian, something that is such a fraction of a percentage of people that get to say something like that have something like that on their resume. And if you're asking me, if you just put the sentence "I'm an Olympian" on a piece of paper and submitted it for a job, I'd be like, bring them in. Let's let's talk to them. Let's get to know. I don't care what else they've done. So it's fascinating to hear you sort of put it that way, and it's wonderful to hear that you had those types of mentors that could really support you through that process. The idea of having so much drive each and every time you start a new project, I think, is something that people are going to listen to this and be like, how do you look at things that way? When I have to assume, and again, I don't want to assume too much, but there's always going to be components about any project that's has elements of routine to it, like something that you've done before. So you're now trying to look at something, let's say a typical project that you're doing within your role now, and say, how can I make it better? So I'm just curious as to, how do you start that process of saying, this is what it was and this is how we make it better?
I'll tell you in two parts. So I'll tell
Okay.
you first off, for me, a lot of my motivation, my internal motivation comes from the disappointments that I went through in my entire swim career. I had a lot of ups and downs. I could probably spend the next like hour telling you all about them, but I'll keep it short. But it's essentially saying, if I had a race that didn't go quite the way I thought it would, It's not necessarily that I failed in that race, but it's an opportunity for me to improve. The
Mhm.
best way that I could improve was to look back at that race and say, what could I have done differently? So, prime example, I missed making the Olympic team in 2004 in the 50 freestyle. What did I do? I was swimming fast, 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 came to the wall, picked up my head before my hand even touched the wall. So, of course,
Mhm.
I'm slowing down. And then I touched the wall. I got third by 3/100ths of a second. If I would have gotten second or first, I would have made the Olympic team in the 50 freestyle.
Right.
At that point, that was one of the things that I took to Athens because I had already made the Olympic team. I took
Mhm.
that to Athens, Greece, and said, I am going to make sure that every race that I do, I have my head down until my fingers touch that wall. And that is something that I worked on. So when we got to the Olympics, I'm sneaking us into being the top two at the finals at the
Mhm.
Olympics because I'm making sure that it was such a tight race, getting my hand on that wall.
Yeah.
So I had that opportunity to look back and say, what could I have done differently? And I think I had and then the other part of it, I'm going to merge the two stories in a minute. The other
Yeah.
part of it was I interviewed for the current position that I'm in 2020. And I actually interviewed with one of our vice presidents in our distribution centers. And she said, I came from marketing. I'm trying to get into HR. So it's a totally different realm for me. And the one thing she told me was make sure you look at the history before you try to move forward, because there may have been elements that were done in the past that will still work today, but then you can
Mm.
bring your fresh outlook on things and improve it. And that's how you have that perfect storm that comes together to make it the best project possible. And I say both of those stories just to say, anytime I head into doing a project, I always look back and say, if it's a project that it was done before, how was it done? What are those elements? What are the little details that were done to make it as successful as it was previously?
Mhm.
And then now I'm going to infuse me, right? I'm going to infuse my skill set. I'm going to infuse my knowledge. I'm going to infuse my fresh outlook on, hey, I may not have ever worked on this project, so how can we do things a little bit differently? Are there efficiencies that we can put in place? Um, are there like different things that we can bring in that we're missing from previously in the project? And I think for me that's always just been my North Star of making sure that, when I was a swimmer, it was any disappointment provided an opportunity for me to excel next time so it didn't happen again. And I
Mhm.
leverage that today in my corporate career of just saying, okay, so this is how projects were done in the past. Now I'm going to grow on that and see how we can improve it and make sure that it's more successful than it was before.
Yeah, it's. I mean, firstly, I just love all this. The first thing that comes to mind, though, as you're talking, is that the previous story you told was almost how humility can be a hindrance when we don't want to sort of brag about ourselves. But here, humility is actually a strength. You're saying like, hey, this has been done really well before. Like, let's not
Mhm.
try to reinvent the wheel here, guys. Let's
Correct.
look at what we're doing well or what has worked, and then to your point, how do we inject ourselves into this in a way that makes it somehow unique, somehow different, and somehow better. And I think that's, again, it's a humility component that's like, hey, every idea is not going to be revolutionary. Sometimes it's just simply building off something that has worked in the past, and
Right.
that can actually be quite it's quite reassuring in many ways. It's like, okay, this isn't quite the crazy project that I thought it was going to be. There's some evidence of how we can do this from the past. But another area here too is the swimming. And again, we were obviously going to make a couple of swimming analogies in this episode, but the swimming analogy. I was recently talking with a client of mine about successes and failures in the sport of swimming, even though he has no understanding of swimming at all. And I would say all the time, like, an athlete could swim a good time, but if I saw them breathe in the last 5 yards of a race, let's say, that's what I would talk to them about. Of course, I would talk to them a little bit about, hey, that was a great swim, it was a great time. You have to be aware, though, that a mistake like that didn't cost you now will cost you eventually. And these mistakes that come up, just having people in your corner to say, listen, that was a mistake, and it may not have cost you right now, but there is something there to be learned from it, even though it wasn't life and death or whatever it may be in that moment. There's something in the future where knowing that information is going to be of service to you. So it sounds as though over the years you've just been able to sort of keep adding those to some sort of memory bank of, hey, make the mistake, make the adjustment, and then try to move on from it. Is that about right?
Oh, I agree 100%. And then also too, just understanding that it's okay to fail forward, right?
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they're like, and you might be listening to this and saying, well, she's always successful. That's not the case. That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but
Right.
I am saying that anytime that something doesn't go the way I expect it to, I'm not just walking away and saying like, oh, it better luck next time, or
Sure.
that can't happen next time. I literally will say, replay it in my mind and say, what can I do differently? And to you, Steve, you know how it is when we're swimming, we can watch film of ourselves at competitions and we say, you know, what could I have done differently? Could have been a better start, could have been a better turn, whatever it might be. And to your point, when you think about those elite top athletes, like let's say Michael Phelps, he's breaking world records just about every time he hopped in the water, but he's
Hmm.
not walking away saying like, oh, that's the best I'm ever going to be. He's actually legitimately looking back at that tape and saying, there's that one thing that I could have done differently.
Hmm.
It could have been like, hey, my breathing was off, or my stroke rate just kind of flinched just a little bit. And that's the thing that he takes to the next swim meet and improves. And then there you go, he's breaking another world record.
Right. And that's what it comes down to. And again, we talked about successes earlier, like what it means to be a success. And these are part of that DNA and part of that identity that we referenced earlier. And while we're talking though too, is just thinking about this role that you're in today, working on talent development, being this voice and this advocate for personal development, for leadership development, whatever it may be. Firstly, I just think, man, how lucky are these people at Carter to have you doing this? Like, this is awesome. Like, what a great reference. But secondly, I'm really interested to know what it looks like now for you to assess a win versus, I don't want to call it a loss or a defeat, but how do you look at something now, a project or maybe it's some sort of workshop, whatever it may be?
Mhm.
How do you look at it and say, yes, that was a win, or yes, that was an opportunity for me to maybe learn from and try to make it better next time?
I think a lot of the things that I work on have multiple elements to it. So
Mm,
before I start a project, or actually, I guess as I'm planning a project, I want to say like, what are going to be my KPIs? What are my key performance indicators? So those are measurable things that I can take away and say at the end, did I accomplish X, Y, Z? And to me, there's also elements that you can't necessarily measure, right? Like
hmm.
sometimes it's feedback that you get from an
Sure.
employee, or feedback that you get from your boss even. So I think for me, like whenever I look at a project and I start to see it kind of come full circle and start to flow out, I kind of say, okay, and I'm going to give you an example of, without giving too much detail, but like one of our leadership programs, right,
Right.
where we have 19 people going through a leadership program, and the goal of this leadership program is to help that employee bump up to the next level. So measurable data right there is going to be, okay, after going through this session, this talent session, what does their career look like in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years? Are they moving up the corporate ladder like they wanted to? Are they getting into those leadership roles? Are they getting additional experience? And then also taking it to the you know the verbal side of it, and
Hmm.
kind of checking in with those employees and saying like, hey, how's it going? Are you leveraging the tools and resources that you learned during the session? And is it beneficial? Has it been helpful? Do you have any suggestions for what we could do different? Because I think that that's the other part of it, is saying like, we're pushing these employees through a certain training or a certain workshop. We're not necessarily saying it's going to work for every employee. So how can we start to make adjustments that will help the next group that will go through this? What are some of those little elements that we can add in that could be different for and one employee versus the other? So just making sure that it's always a learning thing. And
Hmm.
it's like I said, it's there's definitely wins and you want to celebrate them, but there's always going to be an opportunity for improvement in any project that you do.
And do you still having like ways of celebrating when you sense that, hey, this is a win and this is going so great?
At Carter's, we actually really celebrate as a team. So,
Awesome.
we have we call them way to go cards. You get a way to go
Nice.
card, and you can send those out. Like I've had those come from people who have gone through some of our workshops. I've had those come from my boss. I've had those come from our CEO before.
Hmm.
So just being able to celebrate in that sense. And then sometimes when it's a really big project and it was a labor of love, we will go out to like lunch and we'll celebrate as a team.
Uh,
But it, like it's just, it's a matter of just, you don't have to celebrate in a huge way every single time you
right.
get a win, but definitely take the moment to celebrate. I think that was a big thing, even as an athlete.
Yeah.
You sit there and you're like, oh, I only dropped like half a second.
Oh, we were terrible at celebrating as athletes.
Oh
Awful.
my gosh, like
Awful.
seriously, horrible. Like you should celebrate that half a second, because that half a
Yep.
second is you could go 3 years without even dropping time. So celebrate
Hmm.
that half a second that you drop. So I'm just a big proponent of just celebrating the wins together, but then also getting right back into it and figuring out like, all right, what's next? What's coming down the pike? What can we do differently? What are we up against, right? And
Yeah.
just continuing to push forward and collaborate as a team.
No, 100%. And I'm always here for opportunities to celebrate. But one thing that you've really made clear here through just what it means to have a victory, what it means to be a success. There's going to be measurables. There's always going to be human elements to it as well, and that's so clear. That starting with something like key performance indicators, but then making a lot of the process after that based on feelings and engagement with other people, not getting so wrapped up in the numbers, in the figures, in
Yeah.
the data, whatever it may be, and forgetting that there are people involved. And that is so big, especially today. There's so much work that we're doing now on what it means to have purpose in the workplace. And a huge part of that starts with, hey, there's people in the workplace. That's where it starts. Like,
Agreed.
focus on the fact that there are people right there. So leaders listening to this, you've obviously got someone here in Maritza who's educating you in ways that can be so helpful, but hear that as clearly as possible, that at the end of the day, you are working with people. No amount of data will ever replace people. So just be aware of that. But with all this being said, Maritza, you said something before about you could talk about disappointments for an hour, and I could just frankly talk to you for about an hour. But the fact of the matter is I keep my episodes to about 30, 35 minutes, and we're almost out of time. So with all that being said, I do want to give you the opportunity just to tell people more about where they can learn about you, because you've got a great website, you've got all this information, so I want the world to know everything they need to know about Maritza. So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, the best place to learn more about me is definitely my website, so MaritzaMcClendon.com, and just kind of take a look at it. I mean, whether it's you want to learn a little bit more about how I grew up, where I came from, what some of my accomplishments were, maybe you want to have me in as a speaker, definitely book me through my website. Want to follow me on social media, same thing. Go to my website, and all my social media is tagged there. You talked about it earlier, Steve. People, like I am such a people person. It's ridiculous. Like
Yeah,
I love the relationships that I've built over swim. Like I can't tell you how many doors of opportunity have opened because of the people that have crossed my path, or that I've had
right.
taken the opportunity to say, like, more than just, hi, I'm Maritza, like actually gotten to know people, and and leverage that to have the platform that I have now, whether it's as a wife, a mom, an athlete, working in corporate America, whatever it has been, it's been because of the relationships that I've built over the years. So definitely check out MaritzaMcClendon.com, connect with me, and looking forward to hearing from you as well. Steve, don't go another, what has it been, like a decade since we
I don't know
contacted each
what it's been.
other?
I know we've
Let's
bumped
not
into each
do that
other at a
again.
swim meet or something like that, but now that I'm out of Summit, it's just like, who knows how long it will be. But no, all this information is going to be in the show notes. So don't be afraid if you don't know what to do. Just go to the show notes. You'll find it all there. But again, if you were really paying attention here, I'm sure people were, just the fact of the matter is, transitions are real, and going from an athlete to a non-athlete is a huge transition for anyone to take on. But it's not about necessarily one-upping any other type of transition in this world. You just heard from someone here that went from one world to another world, and in many ways, when you go from marketing to HR, you've had more transitions than that main one that you had there from athlete to non-athlete, and you handled it all by looking back and saying, hey, what can I learn? What can I take? How's it going to help me moving forwards? And I think there's so much power in just messages like that. They seem so simple on the surface, but they're so powerful, they're so real, and they're so worth implementing. So Maritza, thank you so much for your generous time, for your generous insight, and we'll just have to bring you back on the show again just so you and I can hang out. How about that?
Absolutely. Love it. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Appreciate it. And my thanks again to Maritza for joining us on the show today. Firstly, just great to catch up with someone that I've known for a while. And secondly, love giving Maritza the platform just to share her story. But in addition to that, just so many key elements and pieces of insight and snippets along the way that have very much made her the woman that she is today, the businesswoman, the athlete, and obviously the inspiration and the mentor that she is to so many. The one thing I really want to emphasize, and there's so much to take away from this, and certainly there's plenty to take away from the sense of things that you can strategically implement in order to really separate yourself or certainly build the type of momentum within your career to take it to new heights, to new levels. But sticking with what we were just saying there towards the end about remembering that we're talking about people here and we're talking about what it means to work with others and to advance ourselves as human beings. It can't always be about data and measurables, etc. So with that being said, I want to empower you to speak up for you. Speak up for yourself. Maritza's story there about how she just referenced it is, all I've done is be an Olympian. That's all I've been able to do up to this point, as she was getting into the real world, as she joked. There's so many things like this that have made you the success that you are along the way, and the reason why I relate so much to this part of Maritza's story is it's really hard for me. It's really hard for me just to sit here and say what I'm great at, why I'm awesome, however you want to put it, because it's just not human nature. And a lot of the time it's associated in a negative way when you talk about yourself, when you big up yourself, however you want to put it. But here we are hearing from a woman that not only was an Olympian, but did something historic as the first African-American woman to represent the US as a swimmer, and then obviously go on and get an Olympic silver medal too. There's so much about Maritza's story that she should be shouting from the top of a mountain, from the rooftops, and letting the world know. And I guarantee you listening, there's something about you that you're hiding as well. There's something about you that if you were willing to just throw that humility to one side, maybe that shy exterior or interior that you have, just put it to one side and let people know. I empower you to do that today. Go find someone and say, listen, I've not mentioned this before, but I'm really great at this. Like, just tell someone what you're great at. Tell them why you're great at it. Tell them how that incredible part of you can impact them and do something for them. And don't be afraid to tell other people as well. You have to become your own cheerleader. You can't rely on other people to keep doing it for you. So Maritza's saying that here in her story, that at some point she had to accept that she had to become her biggest cheerleader as much as she was going to have all these other people in her support system cheering for her as well. So just awesome insight from her. Awesome insight from Maritza. Hope that you took many more pieces of insight and things that you can be implementing within your life, within your career moving forwards. And in the meantime, we're not slowing down. It's hot out there. The summer is here, people. But we here on Career Competitor are not slowing down. The episodes are going to keep coming. The incredible guests, the incredible insight is going to keep coming. Do not go anywhere without clicking that 5th star on your way out. Give us a subscription, give us a follow, whatever it may be. Be sure to tell your friends about us. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, steve@careercompetitor.com as well. And in the meantime, best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on within your world. And bye for now.